I didn't realize I was the family's maid until my fingers were raw from scrubbing the kitchen floor, and nobody even looked up. Dinner was ready, their laundry folded, the baby fed, the groceries put away. But when I sat down for 5 minutes, my mom barked, "You think your work is done? Go help your brother with his project." I was 23, juggling 2 online classes, a part-time job, and a house full of people who believed I owed them every second of my existence. And the worst part, I thought it was normal. I thought love was earned like this through exhaustion, obedience, and silence. My name is Jenna Morales. I'm 26 years old, and this is the story of how I stopped being the house servant and became the one person they never thought they'd need. If you've ever been called selfish just for choosing yourself, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Never again. This story is for you. Growing up in a family like mine, you learn early what's expected of you. My older brother, Julian, was the golden boy, the pride of the house. He didn't do chores because he was focused on school. He didn't cook because men don't belong in the kitchen. He didn't clean because that's your job, Jenna. You're the girl. At 10 years old, I was doing laundry. At 12, I was cooking dinner. By 16, I was skipping my own homework to help Julian pass his classes, which he barely tried in. My parents never outright said I was less important. They didn't have to. It was in the way they praised him for the bare minimum and ignored me at my best. It was in the birthday gifts, new iPhones for him, drugstore lotion sets for me. It was in the language, "She's so helpful," "She's such a good girl," never, "She's brilliant," never, "She deserves more." When I graduated high school, I didn't get a party. Julian did. When I got into a community college, they told me, "That's sweet, but don't get ahead of yourself." Meanwhile, Julian failed out of his first university, and my dad still called him our future doctor. So I stayed quiet. I helped, I scrubbed, folded, babysat, obeyed. I gave up evening classes to pick up my little sister from school. I paused my part-time job to drive my mom to her appointments. I took care of this family like I was born to serve them. One day, I got a migraine so bad I nearly collapsed in the hallway. I sat down on the stairs, dizzy, and all I said was, "Can someone else make dinner tonight?" My mom turned from the kitchen and said, "If you're going to be lazy, don't expect anyone to cook for you when you move out." My brother, without even looking up from his phone, added, "You're not even working full-time. Stop acting like life is hard." That night, I cooked through the pain, not because I wanted to, but because I was too scared of what would happen if I didn't. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning. I'd worked a late shift at the diner the night before, didn't get home until 2 a.m., and had barely slept when my mom banged on my door at 7:00 a.m. "Jenna, the dishes are still in the sink," she said, voice sharp and cold. I shouldn't have to remind you. That's when something cracked inside me, not exploded, just cracked like a tiny tear in paper. I got up, I washed the dishes, I made everyone breakfast. I smiled when my dad walked in. But inside, I made a decision. I was leaving. Not today, not next week, but soon. I didn't know how. I didn't have a place. I didn't have savings. But I knew one thing. I couldn't survive in this house much longer. I wasn't living. I was fading. I was being erased by responsibility. At work that evening, I asked my manager if she knew anyone renting out a room. She gave me a number. Cheap place, not fancy, but safe. A week later, I went to see it. Small basement unit, one window, peeling paint. The floor creaked when I walked. But when I stood in that room alone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. That night, I stared at the ceiling in my childhood bedroom, listening to my family shout about Julian's grades, my dad yelling at my mom, my little sister crying. And I knew, with aching certainty, that staying here wasn't love. It was slow death in a house full of people who only saw me when they needed something. I began to pack slowly, in secret. I stashed clothes in trash bags under my bed. Every tip I earned at work, I put into a coffee can in the back of my closet. I told no one, not my friends, not even my coworker Lily, who I trusted more than anyone, because I knew if my family found out, they'd either guilt me out of it or stop me altogether. One night, while scrubbing the bathroom tiles with bleach, my mom came in and said, "You know, when you have your own family, you'll thank me for teaching you how to care for people." I didn't respond. But in my head, I thought, I'll thank myself for choosing to care for me first. And in that silence, for the first time, I felt powerful. The first time I held my paycheck in my hands, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. It wasn't much, just under $400 after taxes for my part-time hours at the diner, but it was mine to save, to spend, to use however I needed. I sat in the break room, staring at that folded slip of paper like it was a key to something bigger. Freedom, choice, my future. That feeling didn't last. I walked through the door that evening and found my mom sitting on the couch, arms crossed. My dad muted the TV. The moment they saw the envelope in my hand, everything changed. "Let me hold on to that for you," my dad said casually, like he was doing me a favor. I blinked. "What?" I laughed, thinking he was joking. "I've got it." But he didn't smile back. "You live under our roof, don't you?" he said, standing now. "You eat our food, you sleep in our house, you use our water and electricity. You think all that's free?" I stared at him, stunned. "I work hard for this. And we work hard to keep you from living in the streets," he snapped. My mom chimed in, "We're not taking all of it. Just give it to us and we'll give you what you need." My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to say. I was 23 years old, working, going to school, handling their laundry, their errands, their messes, and now they wanted control of the one thing I'd earned entirely on my own. But I was scared. I didn't want to get kicked out before I had a plan, so I handed the envelope to my dad. That night, I cried in my room, not just because they took my money, but because I gave it so easily. That paycheck became the first of many they demanded. Every week, same routine. I'd come home exhausted, smelling like grease and coffee, and my dad would extend his hand like a king waiting for tribute. No thank you, no good job, just expectation. "You're part of the family," he'd say. "We all contribute." But Julian never did. He stayed unemployed, figuring things out, while I paid for groceries and gas. I once overheard him say to my mom, "At least Jenna's finally useful." They laughed. I went to my room, locked the door, and screamed into a pillow until my throat hurt. I started hiding tips in my sock drawer. Every crumpled $5 bill became a secret act of rebellion. I skipped meals at work so I could stash the extra cash. I sold some old clothes online. Every cent mattered. I wasn't saving for anything extravagant, just enough to leave, just enough to matter. One day, my manager at the diner, Linda, pulled me aside. She was older, kind, with silver hair always tied up in a bun. "You've been working double shifts," she said. "Everything okay at home?" I wanted to lie, but something about the way she looked at me made the truth spill out. Not all of it, but enough. She nodded. "Listen," she said, "if you ever need a place to crash, even for a night, you call me. I mean that." That night, I cried again, but this time from gratitude. It was the first time in years someone had offered me something without expecting anything in return. Then things got worse. One Friday, I cashed out early because I needed a new pair of work shoes. Mine had holes in the soles and smelled like death. I stopped at a discount store, spent $28.99, and walked through the door with the shoebox in hand. My dad spotted the bag. "What's that?" "Work shoes," I said, trying to walk past. "With whose money?" he asked, voice sharp. I turned, stunned. "Mine. I worked for it." He took the bag, opened the box, and held up the shoes like they were diamonds. "You think we're made of money, and you're spending on yourself like a princess. They're for work," I said quietly. "I needed them." He shook his head, tossed the shoes back into the bag, and walked into the garage with it. I didn't see those shoes again. For the next 2 weeks, I worked in the old pair until I got blisters on both heels. That was the moment something changed in me. I realized I was never going to be seen as an adult in this house. Not as long as I kept playing the obedient daughter, not as long as I kept giving and letting them take. They didn't want a daughter, they wanted a servant with a wallet, so I made a decision. I opened a bank account without telling them. I changed my pay to direct deposit. I had the statements sent to my work email. I kept working longer hours, told them my checks were smaller. I let them believe I was still under control, while I quietly stacked enough cash to survive on my own for a month or two. I planned every detail in silence. I found a room through a friend of Linda's, a small studio above someone's garage, 30 minutes from work. Rent was $450 a month. Tiny bathroom, no kitchen, but it was mine. And then, on a cold Thursday in November, I left. I didn't make a speech. I didn't write a note. I packed my bags, waited until they were all out, and left the keys on the kitchen table. That night, I slept in a room with no heat, under a blanket I bought from a thrift store. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't have to ask permission to breathe, but the calls started the next day. I woke up in my new room feeling like I'd escaped a burning house. The silence was strange, almost too still, but it wasn't the kind that suffocated. It was the kind that gave you space. For the first time, I opened my eyes and didn't hear shouting downstairs. No one telling me to make breakfast, no one ordering me to run errands, just sunlight coming through the small, curtainless window and the smell of my own freedom. I didn't expect them to be happy I'd left, but I didn't expect what came next either. It started with a text from my mom, short, cold, so you just leave without telling anyone, real mature. I stared at it for a long time before replying. I had to. I'm not your servant. She replied immediately. After everything we did for you, the food, the roof, the bills, you're ungrateful. I hope you realize how selfish you are. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't write back. I knew there was no point. I knew how this would go: guilt, shame, manipulation. They were experts at that game, and I was tired of playing it. By noon, my dad had texted too. Don't bother coming back. You're not welcome here anymore. And then, blocked. Instagram, blocked. Facebook, unfriended. Even WhatsApp, gone. Julian, my golden child brother, posted a story the next day with a screenshot of a text he'd sent to someone who thinks she's better than her family now. The caption said, "Hope the studio apartment is cozy, Queen lol." His followers thought it was hilarious. A few mutuals sent it to me with sad emojis or a quiet "Are you okay?" in my DM, but no one really knew how to help because they all knew my family, and they all knew how deep their manipulation ran. The silence after being blocked wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. Every part of me wanted to reach out, to explain, to defend myself. I wanted to scream, "Do you even realize what you did to me? How you used me?" But I knew the truth. They didn't see it that way. They saw me moving out as betrayal, as rebellion, as if I'd stolen something from them by reclaiming my own life. I spent the first week crying more than I wanted to admit. The quiet got to me. The loneliness clung to the corners of the room. I missed having someone to talk to, even if those conversations at home always ended in fights. But I reminded myself, this pain was temporary. The control they had over me had lasted my entire life. I started building new routines. I worked my diner shifts, came home, ate alone, read books I'd never had time for. On weekends, I walked to the park with my earbuds in, listening to podcasts about healing, growth, and breaking generational trauma. I started journaling again, something they used to mock me for. One entry, I still remember word for word. They call me selfish, but they took everything from me and called it love. I'm not selfish. I'm finally surviving. I taped that quote above my mirror. I read it every day before work. Meanwhile, rumors swirled back home. A friend from church told me my parents were saying I'd run off with a man, that I was on drugs, that I'd been influenced by bad people, anything but the truth that I'd simply had enough. And then came the blow that stung the most. My grandmother, the only family member who had ever truly been kind to me, stopped answering my calls. I left her voicemails. I sent birthday flowers. No response. I later found out from a cousin that my dad told her I'd cursed the family. By leaving that I was lost and disrespectful. It was like they'd written me out of the family narrative completely, and still, I didn't go back. Because in that little studio apartment with the leaky faucet and the creaky floor, I could finally hear myself think. I could make a decision without asking permission. I could buy myself flowers and not be mocked. I could sleep in peace, knowing no one would bang on my door demanding my paycheck. It wasn't easy, but it was real. It was mine. Months passed. Slowly, something shifted. I started saving money. Real savings, not just hiding tips and socks. I got promoted at work. I took a community college course online. I started dreaming again, something I hadn't done since I was a teenager, and I started meeting new people, kind people, people who didn't need to control me to feel powerful. Then out of nowhere, a message appeared on my Instagram. It was from Julian. "Hey, Mom's been asking about you. She wants to know if you're coming for Dad's birthday. He's been in a bad mood since you left. Just thought I'd let you know." I stared at the message. No apology. No acknowledgement of the months of silence, of blocking me, of the things they said behind my back. Just a casual ask, like I was supposed to be the one to mend the bridge they burned. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it. I talked to Linda. I talked to myself in the mirror, and eventually I did reply. "You called me selfish for leaving. Now you want me back like nothing happened. Tell Dad happy birthday, but I'm not coming back, not until someone admits what was done to me. He left me on read." That's when I knew they hadn't changed, but I had, and I wasn't done yet. I wasn't expecting a knock. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind where the world feels paused, no work, no calls, just a cup of lukewarm tea and the faint hum of life outside my little apartment window. The last person I imagined standing at my door that day was her, but when I opened it, there she was, my mother, in all her blipped blazer, wearing arms, crossed glory like she had materialized straight out of a bad dream. Her eyes scanned the hallway first, as if she were embarrassed just being there. Then she looked at me, not with softness, not even curiosity, with judgment. And I swear to you, before she even said a word, I felt my throat tighten. It was Jenna's worst nightmare, realized the fortress she had built around her new life, suddenly invaded. No warning, no call, no apology, just my mother, standing on the mat of the only space in the world where I felt free, as if she still had a right to cross that threshold. "Well," she said coldly, looking past me into the apartment, "aren't you going to let your mother in?" I didn't move. My hand gripped the door tighter. "Why are you here?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her lips curled, and she gave that half sigh she always used when I asked too many questions as a kid. "Is that how you greet the woman who raised you?" "No. That was how I greeted the woman who emotionally wrung me out like a dishcloth and called it discipline." But I didn't say that. I simply stared. Eventually, I stepped aside, not because I owed her, because I needed to know why she came. She walked in like she still owned everything she touched. Her eyes darted across the apartment, judging the tiny kitchen, the thrifted sofa, the pile of laundry I hadn't gotten to. She made a noise in her throat like she pitied me. I hated that sound more than anything. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said. "Hiding?" I repeated. "Is that what you think this is?" She sat down, ignoring the question. "Julian told me you were doing well. Said you even got promoted. Good for you." Her words were meant to sound proud. They didn't. "Is that why you're here?" I asked, to pretend you care. She went quiet for a moment, her hands wringing together. And then just when I thought maybe she might say something real, she said it. "Your father lost his job." I blinked. "What?" "And the car broke down last week. Julian's working overtime, but it's not enough. I've been stressed." My hands began to shake. And I thought maybe you'd come home just for a little while to help out. There it was, not an apology, not a reckoning, not a shred of acknowledgement of what they did to me, just another request to come back into the prison I had just barely escaped from, only now they wanted my help. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so wildly predictable. You blocked me, called me selfish, spread lies, and now when you're low on money, I'm supposed to swoop back in like nothing happened. My mother's eyes narrowed. "You're twisting this." "No." I snapped. "You are. You always do." I stood pacing now. "You didn't come here for me. You came for what I could give you. That's all I've ever been to you. A worker, a wallet, a problem to manage. And now that I've stopped playing your game, you're desperate." She stood up too, her voice hard. "We are still your family, Jenna." "No." I said, louder. "You were a cage." The silence that followed was thick. She had no words, not real ones, only the rehearsed speeches she used on everyone around her. She adjusted her purse strap like she was ready to leave. "I thought you'd matured," she said, turning toward the door, "and I thought you'd changed." She opened the door. Before leaving, she turned back to look at me one last time. "You'll regret this. Families fall apart when daughters become strangers." And then she was gone. I didn't cry, not that day. I sat down on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall for what felt like hours. My chest felt like a war zone, old wounds ripping open, shame and guilt battling with pride and strength. But eventually, something in me hardened, because now I knew for certain they weren't interested in healing. They were interested in reclaiming what they thought they lost, their free labor, their scapegoat, their emotional punching bag. I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't going back, and this time I didn't just have freedom. I had a plan. The silence after she left wasn't empty, it was alive. It hummed with every insult they'd ever whispered behind closed doors, every time they called me too sensitive, too dramatic, too selfish. It echoed with that night I packed my bags, hands shaking, wondering if I'd just made the worst mistake of my life or the best decision I'd ever be brave enough to take. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the lights from cars flicker across the walls like ghosts. Her words, her presence, her entitlement, all of it replayed on a loop in my mind like a broken record. But in that ache, in that rawness, something was also forming, something jagged, powerful and unfamiliar. Not rage, not revenge, clarity. I didn't owe them silence anymore. I didn't owe them invisibility. I had spent 25 years making myself small so they could feel big, but not anymore. I got up at dawn, eyes puffy but dry, and I made a decision. I was going to take every single thing they mocked, every talent they minimized, every spark they tried to smother, and I was going to build something with it. Not to prove them wrong, but to finally prove me right. That morning, I opened the dusty, old sketchbook I hadn't touched in over a year. It had followed me from my childhood bedroom to dorm rooms to this tiny one. Bedroom, apartment, like a stray dog never thrown out, but never truly welcomed. Because every time I tried to open it, I could hear them. "Art doesn't pay the bills, Jenna. It's just a hobby." I flipped through page after page of forgotten dreams, pencil sketches of people I'd met on the subway, watercolor splashes that had once made me cry from the colors alone, and then, buried near the back, a half-finished oil portrait of a woman in profile, delicate, defiant. I stared at her for a long time. Then I picked up my brush. The next 3 months were a blur. By day, I worked my marketing job remotely answering emails, leading team meetings, chasing deadlines, but by night, I painted. With the blinds drawn and low, fine music in the background, I poured myself onto the canvas like it was the only place I'd ever been safe. Each painting wasn't just art, it was a confession. One canvas held the suffocation I'd felt living under their roof. Another dripped with the guilt they taught me to feel whenever I said no. I painted portraits of young girls in chains made of pearls, women blooming out of barbed wire, fists raised, mouths open mid-scream. I shared none of them online, not yet. They weren't for the world, they were for me. Until one night, a coworker who had noticed a sketch pad in the corner during a Zoom call casually said, "You should post your stuff. There's this gallery downtown that just started a Raw Voices submission. Female artists only. You'd kill it." At first, I laughed it off. Me, a gallery, but later that night, I stood in front of my favorite piece, a massive painting of a woman walking away from a burning house, head held high, smoke curling behind her like a crown, and thought, what if? I took a picture, I uploaded it, and I submitted it with nothing but my name, a short paragraph, and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. 2 weeks later, I got the email. "Congratulations, your submission has been selected for exhibition." I stared at it for a full 5 minutes, rereading the words like they might disappear. The gallery wanted me, my story, my pain made into pigment. They asked for a short bio and a title for the piece. I titled it, "The Exit Wound," and in my bio I wrote only one line, "This is what healing looks like when you aren't allowed to speak, so you paint instead." The night of the show, I wore the one dress I had that made me feel powerful in navy. Blue off. The shoulder thing I'd gotten on clearance 3 years ago, but never found the courage to wear. The gallery buzzed with energy people sipping wine, eyes flitting across canvases, conversations rising like tides, and then I heard someone stop behind mine. Who did this? A voice whispered, "It's brutal, but beautiful." I didn't turn around. I just smiled. A few weeks later, the gallery reached out again. They'd had multiple inquiries about my work. One buyer, a private collector based in New York, wanted to buy the exit wound for a six-figure sum. $125,000. I almost dropped the phone. I laughed. I cried. I danced around my apartment like a lunatic. And then I signed the contract. I wasn't just healing. I was rising. I didn't tell my family. They didn't deserve to know. Not yet, but word has a way of traveling, especially in the digital age, because the gallery had tagged me on Instagram, and apparently a cousin of mine still followed me. A week later, I got the first text. Then another, then a call, and then unbelievably a voicemail from my dad. "We saw what you've been doing. Maybe we were too harsh. Your mom wants to talk. So does Julian. Come home for a visit. Come home." Home was never theirs to offer anymore. I stared at the phone for a while, then deleted the message, because I wasn't done yet. One more step remained, the final painting, and this time I would be the one knocking on their door. The street looked the same, painfully so. Same cracked pavement, same faded picket fence, same overgrown weeds pushing through the bricks like they were trying to escape too. As I stood there, clutching a carefully wrapped canvas in my hand, the ghosts of my past tugged at my ankles. I hadn't seen this house in nearly a year, and now here I was, not as the scared girl who once cried behind that second-floor window, but as a woman who had built something beautiful from everything they broke. They didn't deserve this painting, but I didn't come for them. I came for me. 3 weeks earlier, after deleting that voicemail, I couldn't sleep. The words kept circling like buzzards. "Come home." I laughed the first time I heard it. Then I got angry. Then something else stirred. Closure. Not for their sake, but mine. There were still pieces of me trapped in that house, in that town, in those memories. And maybe, just maybe, I needed to stand there in front of them not as a daughter begging for love, but as a woman who no longer needed it. So I painted, one last canvas. It took everything in me. Every tear I'd swallowed, every scream I'd silenced, every apology I'd made just to keep the peace. I poured it all into that piece, a woman made entirely of gold, but cracked like a shattered mirror. And behind her, shadows reaching out trying to hold her back, but her eyes were looking forward. Unapologetically, I called it the goodbye, and I wrapped it up knowing exactly what I had to do. So now I stood at their door, the same one I'd walked out of with a duffel bag and nothing else. I rang the bell. For a second, I almost turned back, but then I heard footsteps. The door creaked open. And there she was, my mother, same tight bun, same judging eyes. But they flickered when she saw me like a crack had opened just enough to let something else through. "Jenna," she breathed, as if saying my name would break the air between us. I didn't answer. I just held out the canvas. She took it hesitantly, glancing down. "What is this?" "Something you need to see," I said softly. She moved aside. I stepped in. It was surreal, the walls still the same faded yellow. The clock still ticking above the fireplace like it had never skipped a beat, like time here had never moved forward, except now it had to. They were all there. Dad on the recliner, arms crossed. Julian, my brother, awkwardly rising from the dining table. Even my aunt, the one who always smirked when I spoke up, glanced over with narrowed eyes. "Didn't expect to see you," Julian muttered. I smiled. "I know." I walked to the center of the room, laid the canvas on the coffee table, and unwrapped it in silence. Gasps, silence. Then, "What is that?" My father's voice cracked just slightly. "It's me," I said simply, "the version you never got to see." My mother stepped closer, her mouth opening, then closing. "You always told me I was too much, too sensitive, too selfish for wanting more, but you never realized. That girl you kept breaking, she was gold. You just couldn't see past your shadows." Julian scoffed. "So you came here to show off?" I turned to him. "No, I came here so I could finally walk out with nothing left inside me. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for an apology. I made peace without any of you, but this painting, it belongs here. It's the only version of me this house deserves." They stared. All of them, not one word, good, because finally the silence was mine. I turned to leave and then I heard it. Jenna, wait, my mother, her voice was trembling. I didn't know. I mean, we didn't know you felt like this. I looked back. No, I said gently, you did. You just didn't care. And I left, this time without looking back. That night, I drove home under the soft glow of the city lights, my phone buzzing with notifications. The gallery had posted a photo of me next to the goodbye. The caption read, "Sometimes the most powerful art isn't about revenge, it's about release." It had over 12,000 likes in an hour. People were commenting, sharing, crying over something I had once been too afraid to say out loud. But now I was free. It's been 6 months since then. The goodbye was picked up by a museum exhibit on generational trauma. I've since been featured in 2 interviews, signed a book deal for a memoir, and even started a foundation that supports young female artists who feel voiceless in their own homes. And sometimes, not often, I still get messages from my family. "Little Breadcrumbs, proud of you. Hope you're doing well. Your cousin saw your painting at the museum, but I never reply, because the girl who used to beg for crumbs has built her own feast."